Vavam and Aleph, the Mishnah at the top of the Amud. Zok the Mishnah, Hamechanes Mois, one who collects coins. He's collecting the coins to amass the amount that's needed for the Masechet Shekel. Va'amar Harayel Shekali, and he says that this should be for his obligation for the Masechet Shekel. So he doesn't know exactly how much money he has, but he says that this should be for the Masechet Shekel. Now there's a basic machlokes if hektish betos shmei hektish or not. If a person makes a hektish, he's maktish something, but he's under the false impression. So he did a betos. Had he known the actual fact, he would not have made the hektish. Beis Shammai says, nevertheless, he says that his hektish, it has a din of hektish. He's maktish it. Hektish betos shmei hektish. Beis Hillel says no. If he made a mistake, then it's not hektish. So over here, he collects the money, and he doesn't know exactly how much he has over here. His intent is to give the Masechet Shekel. So if it turns out that there's extra money, there's more than the Masechet Shekel. So Beis Shammai says, Moisr Nedova. They said the extra amount is a Nedova. Now it can't be for the Masechet Shekel. The Masechet Shekel has to be exactly half a shekel. Ha'asher lo yarba v'dal lo yamid. You can't give more than the Masechet Shekel. So therefore, however, the excess, the extra amount, is not a Masechet Shekel, but it's hektish, and it's for an adova. Because hektish betos shmei hektish, so it's not chulin, it's an adova. Beis Hillel says no. They say that moisrin chulin, that they say the excess is chulin because hektish betos lo shmei hektish. Sha'avi mehen shikli, but if he says when he's amassing this money, he says that I will bring from here, I'll bring my Masechet Shekel. Sha'avi mehen shikli. Then Shavi Shamois Chulin. Everyone agrees that the excess is Chulin because he did not intend to be makdish the entire amount. He wanted to only be makdish from this amount, the Masechet Shekel. So then everyone agrees that the excess is Chulin. If a person says Eilo lechatolsi, if he says that this money should be for my chatos, a similar case, but it's not for the Masechet Shekel, it's for the chiyuv chatos. Shavin shamois nedava. They both agree that the excess amount is an nedava. We'll see shortly why. Shavi mehen chatasi, but if he says, from here, I want to bring from this, I want to bring from my chatas, shavin shamois chulin, then everyone agrees that the excess is chulin because he didn't intend to be makdish the entire amount. He only wants to be makdish from this, the amount that's needed for his korban chatas. So he's only makdish that amount, not more, so the excess is chulin. Why do we say that there is a difference between the shkolim and chatas? Well, we say by the elu shikli, then it's a machlokes, but elu chatasi, then we say that shavin shamayis menadova. What's the difference between the Masechet Shekel and the chatas? So ma bein shkolim lechatas. What's the difference between them? Ella shel shkolim yeshlam kitzah, v'l chatas ein la kitzah. Because by Masechet Shekel, there's a kitzur, there's a set amount. That's only a Masechet Shekel. So we assume that that is the amount that he wanted to be makdish and not more. So therefore, if there is more than a Masechet Shekel, it's subject to the machlokes if hektish betos shmei hektish. But by achatas, there's no kitzur, so we can assume that he wanted to be makdish the entire amount. So even if there's more than what's needed for the korban chatas, it's still kaddish. And therefore, we say that the Meiser is an adova. It's hektish and it's an adova. Rabbi Yehuda Omer after shkolim mein lam kitzah, and Rabbi Yehuda says no, that's not correct because shkolim also there's no kitzah, meaning it can't be less than half of the currency, the prevalent currency. It can't be less than that, and it can't be less than the Masechet Shekel of the Torah. But if the predominant currency is worth more, it's more valuable, and therefore the Masechet, the half of that predominant currency is more than the Masechet Shekel in the Torah, it still has a din of Masechet Shekel. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda says, Af l'shkolim ein lam kitzah, she'geshol Yisrael min hagoyel hayu shekel darkainos. When they came from Bovel, they were shekel darkainos. And that darkainos is more than the Masechet Shekel. So they gave half the darkain. Half a darkain is worth twice as much as the machzis shekel. Chazro lishkol slime. Then after that they started to be shekel slime, and therefore they gave half a selah, and they gave half the selah when the predominant currency was a slime. Then they started Chazal Lishkol Sloim. They switched to Sloim as the predominant currency. Then they gave half of that for the Machzis Shekel. Chazal Lishkol Tvoim. Then the predominant currency became Tvoim, Bikshul Lishkol Dinarim, and they wanted to use half of that, which is a dinar, but which is really only half of the amount of the Machzis Shekel Shel Torah. But the Chachamim did not accept it because it was too small an amount. But in any event, what we see is that the Machzis Shekel can vary in the amount, as long as it's half of the predominant currency, and as long as it's not less than the half Machzis Shekel of the Torah, then it is acceptable. So you see that the amount of the Machzis Shekel also varies. Amru Shimon, Afal Pikein Yad Kulin Shova, but Rav Shimon said no, but it's still different than the Chatas, because it may vary, but everyone has to give the same amount. So therefore, when he said this should be for my Machzis Shekel, he had in mind only the specific amount, whatever the half of that currency, the predominant currency is. So that's all he intended to give, and that's all that he can give. Whereas by achatas, it varies, and it can be more. So therefore, if he doesn't specify it, we can assume that he wanted to give more than that, and he wanted to give the entire amount. So therefore, moisim is nedava. So he says, "Afal pikein yad kolin shava." That's by the machzis shekel. Aval chatas, it's not. Aval chatas, zeh maybe a selah, zeh maybe b'shtayim. One person can bring a selah, and one person can bring. With chatas were two slimes, that may be shalish, and one can give three. So therefore, we can say that the moisrin is nedava. Hamachan is like the Gemara. Hamachan is someone who gathers the shkolim, and he says this should be my shekel. And if there's more, Beis Shammai says the excess is for nedava. Beis Hill says it's chulin. So Rabbi Yaisi b'shem Rabbi Lozer ma pligit. What is the basis of the machlekes? He says, what is the case of the machlekes? Mechanes protos, when he collects it bit by bit. Aval ba'imra el shikli, when he takes a handful, a fistful of them, and he says, this will be my obligation, this will be right for my chiv of machzis shekel. Kolam moedesh ha'meiser nedava. Then everyone agree that meiser is nedava. When he collects it bit by bit, so he's collecting it piecemeal, therefore he doesn't know that if he's reached the machzis shekel or he's exceeded it or not. So we say that's a machlokes, it's hektish betos. He only wants a machzis shekel, but when he says this should be for elul shikli, he intends to give all of them. So therefore, it's not a hektish betos, and it's all for the chiyuv of it's hektish, whatever is what's extra more than the chiyuv of the machzis shekel is on a dova. Rabbi Chiyav, Rabbi B'Shem, Rabbi Loza, they say no. They say the opposite. Ma pligin, where do they disagree? That is b'mechanes prota, where he collects the money bit by bit. That's when the machlekes is avabayim elishikli. When he says this amount, he says this fistful should be for my shekel. He says kolam ha'moide shemaiser chulin. Everyone agrees that moiser is chulin, because we don't say he made a mistake over here. He says this should be, meaning if the machzis shekel from here should be for the value, the machzis shekel should be for my chiyuv of machzis shekel. He doesn't intend to give the whole amount. He says, he has a fistful and he says this should be for my machzis shekel, meaning that half a shekel's worth of it should be for my chiyuv of machzis shekel. Amar of Yomi Masechet Shekalim. It says that the Mishnah is a raya. We can bring a raya to Rabbi from the Mishnah, from our Mishnah. So what does the Mishnah say? It's not Amar Rav Shimon ma ben shkolim lachatos. What's the chilik between shkolim and lachatos? Ela shashkolim yesh lem kitzo, lachatos ein la kitzo. By the shkolim, there's a set amount. By the chatos, there's not a set amount. So manaka kaimin. What are we dealing with over here? What's the case? If he says that we're talking, he says I should bring from this. From here, it should bring my machzas a shekel. Then kolama moedesh shemasr chulin. If he says from here, he's not intending to be makdish the entire amount, only the machzas a shekel's worth from here. So everyone agrees that the excess is chulin. Im boimer shavi mehem chatasi. If he says that I want to bring from here from my chiv chatas kolama moedesh shemasr chulin, and similarly, everyone agreed that the excess is chulin because he didn't intend to be makdish the entire amount, only the amount from this, which is equivalent to my chiyuv of the achatas. Ella ma ella kain anakaimin. So rather, what is the case that we're talking about? So what is the case that we're talking about in the Mishnah? Bo'emer elu shikli. When he says, he takes a fistful and he says, these are for my shekel, for my chiyuv of machzas shekel. Shkolim al yedei shekitzos minatayra shkolim. Since there's a set amount minatayra, we say ma'aseh chulin, that the excess is chulin. Chatas al yedei she'in kitzos minatayra. But by the chatas, where there's no set amount, that you can have a larger amount for the chatas, ma'aseh nedava. But what do we see over here? We see that if a person takes a fistful and he says that elu, these should be for my shkalim, elu shikli, we see that even according to Beis Shammai, the meiser, the excess, is chulim. So ma'avad le Rav Yosef b'shem Rav Eliezer, how will he interpret this? He says, no, also mechanis protos v'kaveis hillel. He'll interpret it that it's talking about, not that he takes a fistful, he takes it bit by bit, and is going dafka according to Beis Hillel, and dafka according to Beis Hillel, where it's a hektish betos, and the meiser is chulin. But we learned the next Mishnah says that the meiser shkolim, the excess of the shkolim, is chulin. More answers. He'll interpret it again that someone who gathers it bit by bit, and it's not going dafka according to Beis Hillel and not according to Beis Shammai. I have a variation of the case. A person, he is mafish the shekel, the money for the machzas shekel. He thinks he's chayiv, and he doesn't realize that he already gave already. And then it turns out that he's not chayiv, like kiddush. So according to Beis Hillel, this is a simple case of hektish betos, and like kiddush, it's chulin. If a person, however, he sets aside two, he thinks that he's chayiv too, meaning he thinks that he didn't give previously, also he didn't give. He thinks he's chayiv too, and he's mafresh too, and he realizes that no, that's not the case. He's only chayiv for one machzas shekel. What is the din with this extra one, the second one? So more answer is nishmana min hado. Let's learn it out from the following. If there's chatos of a samashu chayiv, a person is mafresh chatos, he thinks he's chayiv, and it turns out that he's not chayiv loy kaddish. It's not kaddish. The animal is not kaddish. According to Beis Hillel, hektish betos, it's not kaddish. If he set aside two animals, thinking that he's chayiv two chatois, but it turns out that he's only chayiv one. What is the din with that second one? We say it grazes till it gets a mum, and then you're pointed, and with the money, you use that money for an adova. So here also the excess is, the extra one is for an adova. But frankly, Gemara, how can you say this? How can you compare the two? We learned that there's a chilik between the chatas and between the shekel, the machzas shekel. The machzas shekel has a kitzvah, the chatas doesn't have a kitzvah, so you can't compare the case to chatas and the machzas shekel. Rav Yehuda says that when the Bnei Israel, when they were oila from Bovel, then they used the darkan. So we see that the currency switches. We see that the value of the machzas shekel can vary. Darkainas are dinar. Darkainas are golden dinar, meaning they're golden dinarim and they're worth, therefore, a amount is 2 sloim. So darkainas are dinar, golden dinar. B'chazal ishkol sloim, they switch to sloim. Ke'eshmun, that sell them. Sela as we understand it. Chazal Lishkol Tevoim, then they switch to Tevoim, and Palge Sloim. The Tevoim are the value of it is worth half a Sela. Bikshal Lishkol Dinarim, so they wanted to use for the Chiv the Machzah Shekel half of that, which were silver dinarim, and Kartin, which is also called Kartin quarter. It's a quarter of a Sela. But they wouldn't accept it. It is too small. Min hada, from the following pasuk, it says, "V'hamadu aleinu mitzvahs losnes aleinu shlishis shekel b'shana levayis beis lekenu." It says that we took upon ourselves to give a third of the basic currency for the Beis Lekenu, for the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Meaning that they took upon themselves to give a third of the value of the dargan. It's not that they took upon themselves to give the Chiv Masechet Shekel, that's the Chiv Minatera, but they made a minimum that it should be not less than a third of a darkan, which is more than the Masechet Shekel Shiltera, to ensure that they would not give less than the Masechet Shekel. Rav Chilki b'Shem Rav Acha, he says that he learns this pasuk in a different way. He says, so it says, shekel means that we have to give tzedakah, and not less than a Masechet Shekel, 3 times a year. So it says that you have to, we're not matriach on the community, we don't impose a collection more than 3 times a year. So therefore it says you have to shalish shikla shlish upon bishana, but you can learn out also that you don't make a collection more than 3 times a year. Amar Vavin Mikan l'shalish soin. We see from here that there's 3 soin. We see from here that 3 soin, Mikan l'shalish kupas, Mikan l'shalish hafroshas. You see 3 hafroshas. That therefore you see that we have to give shlishas, you have to give 3 times, that there is 3 times that you do the hafrosha, the trumas alishka, like we learned that they do the hafrosha of the trumas alishka, that 3 times, they do it at 3 intervals. So you learn out from here, from this pasuk, that it says shlishas, that we do it in 3 times. So therefore there's 3 soin, there's 3 kupas, 3 boxes, and 3 hafroshas, the trumas alishka. The pasuk says, "Ksiv zayitnu kol al pekudim," by the Masechet Shekel, by Kisisa, the Torah says zayitnu. This is what they should give. Everyone who is counted should give the Masechet Shekel. Rabbi Yehuda from Nechemiah, Chad Amar, one says Lafi shechata b'Masechet Hayom. This is a kapara for the egel, for the chet egel. They did the chet at noon and half of the day, the midday. Yitnu Masechet Shekel for a kapara. They do a Masechet Shekel. It was at noon, it was 6 hours of the day. Therefore, Yitnu Masechet Shekel, Dovid Shita Garmison, which is the equivalent of 6 Garmison. So that's why they give that amount. Rabbi Yeshua Abbei Rabbi Nachem B'Shem Rabbi Yonachem Zaka, he said, Lafisha Avral Aser Sadibrais, Deroivel Aser Sadibrais, therefore, Ye Noisen Kolach Avechad Asor Gera, they give a Masechet Shekel, which is the equivalent of a Soragera. Rabbi Brechia, Rabbi Leibishem, Rabbi Shem ben Lakish, he says a different shot, in a different vein, he says, Lafish and Machar B'char Shel Rachel B'Esrim Kesef, since the brothers sold Yosef, who was the B'chor of Rachel, and they sold him for Esrim Kesef. They sold him at Esrim Kesef, meaning that's the equivalent of 5 sloim. There's 4 silver dinarim in a sela, so that's the equivalent of 5 sloim. And therefore, for a kapora, there's a chiyuv of pidyon of ben, and therefore there's a chiyuv for each person in Yisrael to be paid his firstborn with the equivalent amount with 5 sloim. Rabbi Pinchas B'Shem Rabbi Levi, he says a different pshat. They sold Yosef for 20 kesef, 20 silver dinarim, and each one of the brothers therefore received 2 dinars. There was 10 brothers involved in it. There are 12 shvatim. they sold Yosef, that's 11, and Binyamin was not part of the Mechira, so 10. So therefore, each one got 2. Therefore, there's a chiv of Masechet Shekel, which is the equivalent of 2 silver dinarim. As a kapara, everyone has to give a Masechet Shekel.